Welcome to Conflict Managed. I'm your host, Mary Brown. Conflict Managed is a weekly podcast about toxic work environments and how to fix them. We're glad you're here. Good morning, Thomas, and welcome to Conflict Managed.
Good morning, Mary, and thank you for having me.
I'm so delighted to talk with you today, looking over all of the things that you have done in your life and how you've been working for peace and with people in all different kinds of circumstances. I'm very excited to talk with you today. But before we get into what you're currently doing, can you please tell us about the first job you ever had as a young person?
The first job I ever had was cutting other people's hair. And that was when I was 16.
How did you get into that?
Well, I was bound to, or I was set up for a career in banking and finance. Everybody in my family would have loved me going down that path. But at some point, I just realized, what am I doing? This is not what I want. I'm not a numbers person. I'm a people person, right? So I want to work with people. I want to do something creative. I want to do something that will make people feel good about themselves, etc. And then it was pretty clear what it's going to be. And so I did that. I did an apprenticeship as a hairstylist, 3 years, and then I got the certificate and everything. And then I thought, okay, well, yeah, that was nice, but there must be more to life and to my professional life than cutting people's hair. In retrospect, I see that it was already more than cutting people's hair. It was engaging in deep conversations, right?
Interesting first job because that's high pressure. People's hair, how they, whether or not they like what you did or how you styled it or the vision they have of themselves. They bring you this picture of someone they don't look like at all, but they want you to work their
Yeah,
magic, and
yeah.
and all of the conversations along the way. So, what was that like as a young person to have really such a high pressure and responsible job?
Well, the pressure I did not perceive as such at the time, I must say. And I mean, either I was very good at what I did, or people were very tolerant. I don't know. But no, I enjoyed what I did a lot, and I also particularly enjoyed being in touch with people, and not just physically because I touched their hair and everything, but really, really connecting. Connecting. And as a hairstylist, you hear from people things you sometimes don't want to know. So there was always this tendency, or in many, many, many cases, there was this tendency of people opening up to me very easily. And this is what I still do today, just in a different context. Yeah. So apparently there was an inclination, or you may want to call it a talent. I don't know. But that's the red thread through my entire biography, with all the zigzags I did on the surface. In essence, it was always about connecting with people, going deep, and having conversations, helpful conversations. Mm.
Oh, what an interesting start to your career, what you have done, as you said, all the way through. I always think it's interesting to look at people's first jobs and how that
Mm.
has formed them. Sometimes the bad experiences early on can really shape what they don't want and who they don't want to be. And of course, having good managers that speak into us and help us see what we don't see.
Mm.
So, of course, being a hair stylist and someone who is a hairdresser is largely you're working on your own with your client, but then there's a broader context. What was that management like, or did you have a mentor early on?
You mean during that time?
Mhm.
I just worked in a salon with other colleagues, mostly women, some men, and we had the owner of the salon who managed the whole business. So there was nothing particularly special about that. Just a normal small business.
So where'd you go on after hairdressing?
Well, then I thought, yeah, what else is out there? And I was a bit hmm, clueless, honestly. And I just engaged in some job hopping. I did that for a year, then I did that for a year. And then eventually I ended up working for a circus because I was not happy where I was. And then I saw this little ad in the newspaper, a very, very small ad that basically said on 3 lines, Circus Viva is looking for a press spokesperson, someone who talks to the newspapers, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, I think I can do that. So I called them. I went there. They were already on tour. The season had just begun. And I had a conversation with the owner in front of his truck, his trailer. And 3 weeks later, I moved into my own trailer. So I did 2 seasons with the circus, touring around Switzerland, up to the mountains, up to Zermatt, beautiful places. And I also, among many, many other things you do at the circus, I also did press relations and a little bit of that, but mostly it was really hard work building the tent, dismounting the tent or disassembling the tent, driving transport with big trucks and trailers. And that was when I learned to work with my hands, but really like not cutting hair, but really, you know, hard work.
Yeah.
Did me good. It did me good. Did me good.
Yeah. Lots very physically demanding, I would
Yeah,
imagine.
exactly. And and then I saw an ad again after like 1.5, almost 2 years, of Swissair, the former Swiss national airline of Switzerland, and they were looking for flight attendants. And that was a key moment to me because I read through all the requirements and I thought, wow, this could be really, really a good match for me. And I did apply and I got the job and I started and I immediately felt like, wow, this is the first time I really feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and it's a match
Mm.
because I could work with people, I could use my language skills. I work in 4 languages today, right? So, uh, and I got a beautiful opportunity to care for people.
And how
And
long were you with the airline?
yeah, that was a bit more than 7 years.
Mm.
So quite quickly, I became a purser. I started leading cabin crew. So that was then the leadership context that came into it, and learned a lot about myself, about what works among people when they are together, what escalates, what de-escalates, how do you calm down a situation, or solve an interpersonal issue on the spot without escalating it.
Mm.
Because in a small tube with 300 people up in the air, you cannot escalate and you cannot ask for external help either. You cannot call the police or anyone. You have to resolve it. And it was a very, very educational experience, the entire 7 years. And I still benefit from that time in the work I do today with leaders in organizations.
So very interesting, these variety of experiences that you have
Mm.
had up to this point. I know there's more after this, but and you haven't even mentioned all the different jobs you've done. Is it have you always been seeking adventure or new opportunities, or is this part of the creative aspect of your life of trying this and then seeing what else is out there? Because as you know, sometimes people get in a job and 40 years later, they're still there.
Yeah, and happy.
Yes, yes.
Yet many in around the middle of their life, very often between, let's say, like 35 onwards to their mid 40s, start feeling a sense of, was that it already? Like, is this gonna continue like that? Am I really doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Or is there more for me? I think we all have an innate need or desire to bring out the best in us, to thrive, to flourish, like a plant, like a flower, right? And I think we're supposed to bring out the best in us. That's what we're here for, right? And help others do the same. So I think it was that driver, that intrinsic driver I always had to find a context, find an environment in which I can really bring out who I am in my essence and contribute to something bigger by doing so. So that was the quest, I guess, in hindsight.
You know, it is interesting when we're in a work environment. We have people who come to a place and they're contributing and they reach the end of what they see they want to do there or that role. And so they either move up or move out to another place. And as we have those other people who are lifers, my father-in-law worked with one company for 44 years until he retired. My husband, he's a philosopher, and I think he will stay at the university that he's at until he retires. And I also taught philosophy at the same place for a very long time, taught philosophy for over 20 years. And I then experienced that sort of midlife. What else is there? For me, I looked at the time I had spent at the university, very proud of my work, loved it, and it was right for me at that time. And then a shift began where my time was up and I knew it, and I was looking for how can I take everything I love about what I do and apply it in a different way for the second half of my life. And so I think that we do break up our working career depending on who we are and how we see our mission, or
Yes.
how we see contributing to our flourishing and the flourishing of those around us.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And what's also important is to see how the environment is constantly changing, as I mean, much more and much more quickly than a few decades ago, right? And so even if you stay seated in the same chair for your entire professional life, it's very likely that you end up working for different companies while staying at the same place, because the company is being acquired by another company, then the name changes and stuff. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that we live in times where it's not just accepted and tolerated that you change your profession multiple times throughout your career, or you reinvent yourself multiple times throughout your career, but it's necessary, it's needed. I just recently read an article where I don't know, he was like a scientist, looking at future trends and how things will evolve. And he said the generations that are born now are very likely to have 4 to 5 different professions throughout their professional career, half of which don't even exist yet. So there will be, even my kids, I have 2 teenagers, even my kids may end up doing something that does not even exist as an activity, as a service, or as a product. So it's highly exciting, I think. It can make you nervous and
Yeah.
it's scary in a way because it's unknown, but the unknown, if you meet it with curiosity and self-confidence, it can be so exciting.
I absolutely agree. And when I think about so what I deal with in my new career is workplace conflict and healthy work environments. And one thing that happens so often is that people feel stuck
Mhm.
and they feel disempowered and drop into despair given what's going on either in the culture, in the organization, or with another person, or whatever their situation is. And I think if we encourage people and really set them up for success in the way things are now, and certainly into the future, which is change is the name of the game. I think if we start really encouraging it and speaking the way that you were just speaking, that we are going to change and we ought to be looking to change and grow and develop, then I think there's less likelihood of being stuck for a long time because we're expecting things to change and we're expecting new opportunities. And so when something is really not working for me, I know there are other opportunities. So I do think that we should try to work things out insofar as we are able because um,
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
But just as a mindset of I'm stuck. I'm stuck if I tell myself I'm stuck. But if
Exactly.
we start helping people manage their expectations that what does it mean to be a professional? It's not necessarily here at this organization. That's one part of my story, but who am I?
Yeah.
And developing that sense.
Exactly. Self-discovery is a key and is a really, it's a process of discovery in the sense of uncovering, like removing everything that's not you, everything that you have acquired, that you have taken on as beliefs about yourself, about the world, about other people, that is not you, right? In our childhood, in our early teenage years, etc., we take on so much from other people that influence us in best intentions, and it's okay. It's a part of learning. But there may come a point in our lives when we have to just critically look at everything we believe, we have come to believe, and question it. Is that really true? Do I really believe that? Or is that just something I took on and and might this hinder me or be hindering me in moving forward and achieving my goals? And the beautiful thing about these beliefs, the truth, a belief is just a thought we keep thinking, right? It's a habit. Uh, we can take a belief, look at it, and say, no, thank you. Uh,
Yes.
Not anymore, and throw it overboard,
Yeah.
right? And this frees up, this frees us, right, from the chains of beliefs. And there's this beautiful quote by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who wrote that uh, does not perfection is not created when you cannot add anything more. It's created when you cannot remove anything anymore, right? So remove anything and everything that is not essential, and then that creates perfection. So remove everything that's not you and find the essence of who you really are. And that's work.
Yeah.
It's work, right? And I loved how you use the word encouragement. Yeah? We should encourage people to be courageous and bold and believe in themselves, right? Uh, there is this phenomenon in our perception. It's called negative bias. Yeah? I'm sure you've heard of it. So we have this tendency to focus on anything negative, we consider negative, much more than anything that's positive, right? It's like we're like Teflon to positive experiences, right? And the negative things are like magnets attracting our attention. And the unfortunate thing with that is that it also affects our self-perception. So most people, when you ask them about their strengths and weaknesses, although I don't like the term weaknesses, but maybe their strengths and limitations, they are very quick to come up with what they're not good at or, yeah, not good enough at. And very rarely you find someone who can say, look, this is what I'm really good at. This is what I'm better at than most other people. These are my core strengths and competencies, and these are my qualities. And without being arrogant, but by being very aware of what makes me unique, right? And that's something I agree with you. We should encourage people to do and explore, and because you that's how you empower yourself to deal with the constant change, with this, which is the only constant thing in life, right? We know that rationally. We know it. It is the only thing that never changes. The fact that everything changes always.
That's right. And I think the more we're rightly related to reality, right, the more we can accept what is, the more then we can decide, okay, so what am I going to do next instead of living
Yes.
in wish fulfillment or living in the past or these old narratives that we have given ourselves. I love that pulling away, sort of that Occam's razor, remove what is unnecessary to see what are my core values and how did I get them? Did I adopt them from somebody else? Which is not always bad if I therefore go for the work and say, yeah, and I agree. right? And yes, this is me for these reasons. One thing that I come across in my work is when you are in a work environment, people are showing up at all different stages of development, right? We are
Mm.
all people on the way. We're not done, right? We are in process continually. But you have a variety of people, and they're in different stages of emotional intelligence, different stages of being able to be very reflective about their life. And then you have people in different stages caught in a conflict.
Yeah.
And we're in a work environment, so I'm not, if as the mediator or someone who's coming in to support, I'm not telling anybody what to do. I'm not their mama. I'm not, we're at work. So how do we how do we help people who are in different stages of development, moral, emotional, and intelligence, see that, reflect so that they can come together and have a dialogue to move forward?
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's a very big question with many, many, many different aspects. Let me
Of
start
course.
off maybe by saying we are talking about diversity, right? The fact that we are different. We're all human beings. We have the same DNA, but each of us is unique, right? I, as a person, exist only once on this planet. Some people might say that's good, but yeah, let's not go there. So we're talking about diversity, uniqueness, and this diversity can be both fertile ground for misunderstanding, mistrust, resistance, and conflict. Or the very same diversity can lead to um, integration, an enrichment of our being together, of our working together, and bringing out the best in everyone and being more than the sum of its elements. The key, that decisive key that decides whether it goes down towards conflict or towards enrichment is understanding. If I don't understand why somebody else acts the way they act or thinks the way they think or does things the way they do, if I don't understand that, I might be inclined to judge and I might be inclined to think that's wrong. I'm right, they're wrong. How can they say something like that? It's totally wrong, right? If I do understand where somebody comes from with a statement, or when I do understand why somebody ticks so differently than I do, I can not only tolerate this difference, but ideally I can integrate it in the collaboration or the leadership, and then the magic happens, right? So the key is understanding. Coming to your question, you said, how can we help people work in such an environment of high diversity with different levels of experience, competence, etc., etc.? Well, by creating a safe space, by creating a climate of psychological safety in which this exploration of each other's values, beliefs, opinions, etc., personality styles can happen. So by moderating this endeavor of curiosity and getting to know each other and replacing judgment by knowledge. That would be my approach, helping people understand others and themselves. It starts with themselves.
I just think that's a brilliant answer, the understanding. How do we get understanding? It's through the process of the dialogue, and the dialogue is dialectical. So I might say, okay, what's going on, thinking I know what's going on, but if I can de-escalate myself enough to pause and really be present to listen, because active listening is an activity. I'm there present and I'm engaging in a dialogue with you, then all of a sudden, right, I have this information that I didn't have before. I thought I knew because I've made this judgment. I know, But all of a sudden, if I really have understanding where another person is coming from or their
Yeah.
perspective, I do have new information that's going to help me turn that negative narrative into the possibility of collaboration, into the possibility of
Yeah.
how can we get from these little positions up here to what are the needs are in
Yeah.
order to start actually problem
Yeah.
solving.
Yeah.
And right, understanding is not that I agree with your position or that I think that you're right. That's neither here nor there. But so many times we just think if I understand, I'm giving some sort of tacit agreement to whatever or approval of what you're
Mm,
doing.
mm, mm.
And so that understanding, I think you're absolutely right. If we help organizations and individuals create a climate of pausing, looking at our own narrative and trying to understand.
Yeah, yeah, and non-judging, not immediately judging, because the moment we judge, we stop looking at things. We just put a label on them, and that's it. Stupid, right?
Right.
Label, wrong, label. And that's what our mind does. Our mind is a labeling machine. That's okay. That's fine. The point is we have to realize that,
Right.
right? And understand what the mind is doing. And that this labeling, by labeling other people and their behavior, we might not do justice to them, right? Um, and there are a few mindsets that can be very, very helpful in this regard. So one mindset, for example, is to say everybody's right. Everybody, everybody's right from their perspective and from their point of view and on their level of consciousness. Of course, I might think I'm right, they're wrong. And I'm not saying I give, I agree with everyone, as you just said. I agree with everyone. Yeah, you're right. It's okay. You're right. That's exactly not what I mean. What I mean is, I give you the right, I grant you the right that to believe that you're right, just as much as I believe that I'm right. It's okay that we both come from two different sides, both believing that we are right. That is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Now help me understand what your right looks like. And I'm going to explain to you how my right looks like. And then we might find out not who's right, but what is right. What is the right thing to do now coming from this disagreement? And there's a whole new world of possibilities opening up by doing so. So, assuming that from their perspective, everybody believes that they are right. Of course they do. And on top of that, assuming good intentions.
Yeah.
Assuming good intentions. There are always exceptions, of course. Yes, there are mean people out there. Yes, no doubt. But in general, where we work together and we work in the same company for the same purpose, for the same clients, and we have a disagreement about how to do something, well, we can assume good intentions. We can really assume that the other person also wants to do what's best for the company and what's best for the clients, just in a different way, just coming from a different perspective. Based on their knowledge and their experiences. And they might have a point. Yeah, who knows? And if I believe that everybody's right and I assume good intentions in the other person, if you think about this for a moment, you will almost feel how different I approach a conversation if I come to the conversation with that mindset, right? There's much less pressure or confrontation in there and much more curiosity. Help me find out how you see how comes you see it like that? I cannot understand. Help me.
I agree with everything you said, but I think you gave just a wonderful explanation of what does it mean to have a growth mindset. What does
Yes.
it mean to be an open person? Some people say you don't want to be so open that everything falls out, right? Being open to new ideas and other ways of doing things does not mean that you don't have your robust set of beliefs, whatever they may be. But being open is this sense of knowing who you are, but also knowing that you don't know everything, and that diversity is a good. It's exciting that we ought to have diversity of opinion, and that if nobody is disagreeing with you in your job, who are these people? Let's get some other voices in here because your constituents, whoever they be, aren't all made in your image. And isn't that wonderful that
Yeah.
there are a variety of things? And I think also that that mindset of not only that diversity is a fact, but that it is a good. It actually is good
Mm.
that people have different experiences. That means if I can really have that psychological safety, whatever product or service, event we're putting on will be that much better because we've thought more thoroughly through our own blind spots. Maybe having, like, I don't like swag at events. I don't want anybody to give me a keychain. I don't want any of that stuff. I'm not going to pick it up. Like, I don't want it. But that's me. And not everybody sees the world the way I do. And if somebody else is like, I love all my swag, and let's talk about, okay, so we can have this conversation. Well, who are the people that are going to be there? And it's
Yeah.
not just my image, it's not just yours and these
Mm.
other,
Mm, mm, mm.
but if we just go in, like I'm right, everybody is there in like some sort of pit, and we're all duking it out instead of how can we really collaborate? Collaborating is having strong beliefs, but being able to have adult conversations with others to find the best path forward at this time for this situation.
Exactly. Exactly. And there's a link from what we're discussing here and now to back to what we discussed earlier about self-confidence, knowing yourself, self-awareness. You see, the less certain we are of ourselves, the more we depend on outside validation and what other people think of us, the more likely we will perceive diversity as a threat, right? So if somebody disagrees with me or has a different opinion, I may perceive it as a threat because I'm not stable and certain and confident in myself and who I am. And the more certain and self confident I am, because I know myself and I've done the work, the more relaxed I can just deal with diversity, the more I can act from a state of curiosity, from a place of curiosity rather than from a place of self-defense, right? Because I think I have to protect myself.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. And part of authenticity is vulnerability, you know, being willing to show your true colors and say how you feel about something and admit maybe that, okay, I might have made a mistake, or be humble enough to say, okay, I think I think you are really right. And I think I have to revise my opinion, and I'm willing to do so. That's a sign of true strength,
Yeah.
right? Not of weakness.
So I can imagine, Thomas, somebody listening to our conversation who is in what they consider a toxic work environment. Maybe they have a manager who is micromanaging them or really truly is maybe even threatened by them, and however, just a really bad environment. And they hear, well, they think I have to operate from a place of defense because if I am not on the defense, there are a bunch of piranhas here and they're gonna get me, and I need to pay my mortgage. I need to feed my kids. And so this, beautiful picture of, collaboration and curiosity, that's just not my reality. What would you say to somebody who's in a really awful situation at work?
Yeah,
And let's suppose for whatever reason they can't leave at this time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's a hard one, right?
Yeah.
That's very challenging, and that's not an easy situation. Let's face it. Now, in any situation that frustrates you or weighs you down or is just you're not satisfied with the situation, you're not happy with the situation, there are always aspects to that situation that you cannot change. You cannot change them, you cannot control them, there's nothing you can do. They are what they are. And there are always aspects that you can influence, where you can actually do something, where you actually have choices. We are often not aware of these enough. And very often people feel stuck in a situation, stuck in resistance against things that they cannot change, stuck in frustration, anger, whatever it may be, against things that by just thinking about it for a moment, there's nothing you can do about that. There's this concept of the circle of influence and concern by Stephen Covey, for those who want to look it up. It's a great, great model that really helps understand that. What's always outside of our control, our direct control, is other people's behavior.
Right.
So what other people do, don't say, it's not really much we can do about that. What is in our circle of influence and within our control and where we have choices is how we respond to that. Actually, it's three things that we have always got in our circle of influence. Number one, where I put my focus of attention, what I focus on. So I might be working in a toxic environment. I have a micromanaging boss, and many aspects of my situations are really negative and bad. At the same time, I may have two, three lovely colleagues whom I work with who are in the same situation, that are beautiful people, good hearts, and they also suffer, but they're great people, right? So what do I focus on? Focus is like a flashlight. You can choose what to shine the light on, and what you shine the light on, you will see better, will be more prominent in your perception. So what do you focus on? You focus on the micromanaging boss and the toxic climate, or do you decide to focus on those great people and the relationships you have with them and how supportive each of us is towards each other? That's a choice we can make. So that's number one, what I focus on. Number two is the meaning I give to all of this. We have a choice what meaning we give to it. The reactive, impulsive meaning I give to it may be very negative. Oh, what an unpleasant situation. It's a catastrophe. It's terrible. It's a drama. Which is a mindset that creates a certain emotional state in me, of course. Or my boss, right? What a terrible person. How can someone be a leader like this? Or I give a different meaning to it, meaning I reframe it. I put the same thing into a different frame of reference, and I choose to think differently about it, maybe with more empathy, maybe with more compassion. Like, I wonder what made him become the person he is today. I wonder how he feels inside, he or she, right? So you see a bit along these lines, replacing reactive thoughts with something more constructive, empathetic, compassionate, which will create a different emotional state inside me. So I do it for myself. Forgiveness is something you don't do for other people, you do it for yourself. And the third thing we can always control and where we have choices is how we respond to it. Do I feel like I have to react to everything? Do I react to everything without even noticing? And only afterwards I notice, ooh, that may not have been such a good thing to say, but there it exploded out of me, right? Um, or can I allow myself a non reaction every now and then? Because it just doesn't get any better if I do, right? Do I have to respond to everything? No, you don't. You don't. If somebody asks a question, you should probably give an answer. That is the socially expected response to a question. If somebody just makes a statement, no need to answer. It was not a question, right? And we have many, many more options to respond to things or not respond than we think. So, a good exercise in such a situation would be to take a sheet of paper and a pen and draw a vertical line in the middle and then start making two lists. In that whole situation that I do not like to be in, what are the things I cannot change or control? And start making that list. The fact that I have my boss is my boss, how my boss behaves, the fact that we're having a toxic climate, etc., etc., etc. And then you make the second list. All the things that I can influence or control, where I have choices. What I focus on, the meaning I give to this, how I respond, etc., and many, many more things that by starting to think about them come to mind. And the list becomes longer and longer and longer and longer. And then comes a crucial step. What is the only logical and healthy way of dealing with something you cannot change or control? Accept it. Accept it. And I call it radical acceptance. Radical acceptance because acceptance is not a spectrum. You cannot accept a little bit. It doesn't work. It's one or zero. Either you accept or you don't. So radically look at the first list of things you cannot change or control. Say to yourself, it is what it is, and I will accept it for what it is because I cannot change it. And now I will let it go. Because acceptance and letting go are two sides of the same coin. The moment I accept it, I can let it go, meaning I don't think about it anymore too much. And now I have all the free capacity to focus on the other list and the other things and the things I can change or control. That is a very, very helpful exercise. I would highly recommend.
Oh, that's wonderful because conflict resolution is about personal empowerment. And a lot of times in those circumstances, we tell ourselves stories, but we don't know we're doing it. We think we're just talking about reality. And you've just so brilliantly illustrated how that is not the case. And actually, we can see how expensive our habits of mind cost us. We have decided to have this drive us crazy. We have decided to beat our fists against the wind about how this person is in the world and how that has cost us our mental, sometimes our physical health, and we can make different choices. And I think people don't think enough about habits of mind, like, oh, I can talk negatively about this person and it doesn't cost me. In fact, I'm just blowing off steam. Well, insofar as we let our minds go, and I start spinning this negative or this particular narrative that is, it can be actually cost us quite a bit. Because what if I took that other turn and said, gosh, what would it be like to be that person? Or I wonder what their boss is like, or I wonder what they're reacting to. And that is so freeing. And we can choose to say, assign one or another. And it is within us because reality, like you get in a car wreck, your car is totaled. What does it mean? It's meaningless until we assign any meaning to
Yes.
it.
Yes.
And that is the world. We decide, even in truly awful circumstances, um, there is, I mean, there is pain, right? There's the pain is that, some things are really awful and we have to go through the suffering. That is, a part of life, that the joys and the pains and everything in between. But as we assign meaning to suffering, as we assign meaning to joy, who's assigning it?
It's
It's
exactly.
us.
Yeah.
But how have we trained ourselves
Yeah.
to assign meaning? And I think that is something that we can really help people focus on professionally and in their private life. So I know that after you left the airline, you have done other things, and you are a coach. And what do you find in the clients, leaders and otherwise, that when they come to you, what are some of the maybe blind spots? Are there any particular blind spots you see a lot that you help your clients with?
Oh, many, many, so many. We all have them. We all
Yes.
have blind spots. And I often compare it to the outer mirror on your car,
Mm,
where you have a blind spot, you have a dead angle, right?
mhm.
Where if you change lanes now, you're going to crash into another car. Everybody else can see that, but you don't. But you
Yes.
don't, right? And as long as nobody's telling you, how can you do something about it? It's very
Yeah.
similar. And I often work with people in middle management and also top management, And the more successful someone is in an organization and in their career, the more likely that person will believe that they have become successful because of the way they are and the way they do things. And I can totally relate. I can totally understand. Yeah. And it is, of course, also true to some extent, to a certain point, up to the point where they are not aware of their blind spots and where they are not aware that they also became successful and are successful despite some of the things they do or how they do things. That they are successful despite some behaviors that are a turnoff for their team or even demotivate others around them. But as long as nobody tells them, they cannot change it. And the higher up you go in an organization, um, the less likely it is that you will get candid feedback and that people will really tell you, hey, you know what? It would be great if you could just stop that. Right?
Yes.
Nobody does, right? So yeah, there I see uh, very often I see blind spots, even to the extent that I sometimes think where the need for change or development is the biggest, we have the lowest problem awareness. Why should I? Look at me. I'm leading this company. Can't be that wrong, can it? Right? And in my toolbox, I have some instruments that can help in such cases if the person is willing, of course, to look at that and humble enough to say, okay, I might not be perfect. Maybe there's still something I can learn. Maybe there's still something I can improve. Right. And then what I often do is what is called a 360-degree feedback process, where you basically ask their most important stakeholders, their environment, their surroundings about their feedback and in an anonymized way. And then I go through that. I go through the results with that person, with that leader. And sometimes it's a wake-up call,
Yeah.
which is great because only what we are aware of, we can control. What we're not aware of often controls us. So the awareness empowers us to do something about it and to change it.
Yeah. I love that answer because feedback it can sting, especially when it's negative feedback, but it
Yeah.
is a gift. It's a gift in the sense that sometimes the feedback is about that person and not really so much about us, but that's good information. This is how they're perceiving the world, and this is what maybe they need.
Yeah.
But if we can be open enough to say, okay, how we take this feedback, how can I get better if I don't know,
Yes.
right?
Exactly.
How?
Yeah. And, negative feedback, you just mentioned. Um, of course, in my leadership development work, given feedback in a brain-friendly way, in an emotionally intelligent way, is at a core topic.
Right.
And in my understanding, there is no such thing, or there shouldn't be such a thing as negative feedback. Of course, what we mean when we say negative feedback is corrective feedback. Because what do we want if we give someone a negative feedback? We want the person to be open, take it on board, say thank you, and then change,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
However, the way most people give negative feedback makes the receiving person feel criticized.
Yeah.
And nobody likes to be criticized,
Yeah.
because it's potentially threatening on the relationship level. And most people react to feeling criticized with emotional stress, and an
Mhm.
emotional stress reaction such as fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
Either they go against, and yeah, but you do the same, right? That's basically an attack,
You're right.
or justification, or explaining why, or just being paralyzed and not knowing what to say, right? So to avoid that, that's a matter of technique. How
Yeah.
do you methodically give a brain-friendly feedback so that you can tell someone about a correction they should be doing in such a way that they listen openly, they remain open, and they say thank you. Now I know what I need to change.
Yeah.
So that's why in my world there is only positive feedback, because even a corrective feedback should be perceived as positive
Yeah.
by the receiver.
It's so interesting because we all want to know. So if everybody else knows something about us and it's negatively impacting us and them, we want to know that. And yet many of us bristle about how we're told. Because by the time somebody tells us it's been going on and it bubbles over. And so
Yeah.
having that culture of feedback insofar as it's actually a mercy, it's really a grace to tell somebody
Yes.
when their behavior is not meeting or exceeding expectations so that they can do something. And yet we get frustrated at people for not doing what they should be doing, and they clearly don't know.
Yes.
And it's this vicious cycle instead of a virtuous cycle of how can we be better tomorrow? Well,
Yes,
if nobody ever
exactly.
tells me, I'm going to keep on doing what I've been
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. And the aim should really be to foster a climate of psychological safety, as I mentioned before, in which this giving and receiving feedback to each other is a normal thing,
Yes,
an everyday
exactly.
thing. And it's a known fact that this has a direct impact on the what I call the emotional balance sheet in a team. Like,
Mhm.
what's the climate like? Is it predominantly positive, or is it predominantly negative? And people are always tense, right? Big difference. And it's also known that uh, organizations and teams perform even better if it's not only a climate of giving feedback and offering feedback to each other systematically, but a climate of asking each other for feedback consistently and regularly. Small difference. So is it more normal that we give feedback to each other, or is it more normal than that we ask each other for feedback? What's the difference? The difference is the readiness to accept feedback. Because when I initiate a feedback conversation, when I come to you and ask for your feedback, the question of whether it's a good moment to talk about it or whether I'm willing to listen and take on the feedback is off the table. Of course I am because I'm asking.
Right.
So
And
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Go ahead.
And I was just going to say that I love that because it also, we want to give people feedback, but even more, we want to see that they've listened and incorporated. There's almost nothing worse than some sort of survey. We give feedback and it just goes into that atmosphere and nothing changes. It makes us more uh, upset with whatever the circumstance is. And so I love that because it shows I'm open, I'm willing, and therefore there's a likelihood that that change or I might be able to have a conversation with you about what's going
Yeah.
on or right that dialogue, that psychological safety. Well, Thomas, we are sort of at the end of our conversation. And so my last question for you is, as you think about your children going out into the workforce, you think about the future of work, what do you think needs to happen so that not only every worker is treated with dignity and respect, because that's a baseline, but that we are encouraged to thrive and flourish? And we've been talking a lot about that, but what are some, or what's something or some things that you think need to happen in the workplace of the future that encourages this thriving and flourishing?
More investment in personality development.
Mm.
So it all comes down to personality development. Leadership development is personality development. And if we have leaders in organizations that do not treat people well and do not bring out the best in people, it often has a lot to do with where they are in their own development, what it looks like inside them. So what needs to happen? More investment, more instruments, more opportunities, more spaces where people can do the work on themselves, grow. So it's strengthening the individuals in becoming who they are and feeling good about who they are and about themselves, which links to the beginning of our conversation, I guess.
And I love that answer. And I really agree. I think that that's where it's at because that will trickle out and they can be those supportive leaders that, right? Absolutely. Well, Thomas, thank you so much for talking with me today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. It was my pleasure, and it went by very quickly.
It did. It did. Thomas, thank you so much for being a conflict manager. You were a real joy to talk with. I just appreciate your outlook and the work that you were doing to help people have healthier work environments. Conflict Managed is produced by third-party workplace conflict restoration services and hosted by me, Mary Brown. You can find us online at 3pconflictrestoration.com. Come back. We have new episodes every Tuesday. And if you'd like to watch this conversation with Thomas and I online, it's on YouTube at 3P Conflict Restoration. If you haven't had a chance to check out my book, How to Be Unprofessional at Work, Tips to Ensure Failure, it's 80 tips of what not to do and considers what we ought to do instead to have healthy work environments. Our music is courtesy of Dove Pilot. And remember, conflict is normal and expected. Let's deal with it. Until next time, take care.